Sarah first noticed him on a Tuesday morning in October. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke as she hurried down Fifth Street toward the coffee shop where she worked. There, sitting on the weathered wooden bench outside Miller's hardware store, was a man in his 50s with gentle eyes and clothes that had seen better days. His jacket was faded navy blue, patched at the elbows with careful stitches. His shoes were worn but clean, and his gray hair was neatly combed despite its obvious need for a trim. What caught Sarah's attention wasn't his appearance, but the way he sat there with such quiet dignity, watching the world wake up around him. She worked as a barista at Corner Grounds, a small coffee shop 3 blocks from her tiny apartment. The pay barely covered her rent and student loans, but she loved the warm atmosphere and regular customers who had become like family. At 28, Sarah had learned to appreciate small pleasures and kind gestures more than grand romantic gestures or expensive gifts. The man appeared on the bench every Tuesday and Friday morning at exactly 7:30. Sarah began timing her walk to work so she could see him. He never asked for money or bothered anyone. He simply sat there, sometimes reading a battered paperback book, other times just watching the morning unfold. One particularly cold Friday in November, Sarah couldn't stand it anymore. She stopped at the bench, her breath visible in small puffs in the crisp air. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked up from his book with surprising warmth in his brown eyes. "Good morning to you too, miss." His voice was educated, refined in a way that didn't match his circumstances. Sarah felt her curiosity grow stronger. "I'm Sarah. I see you here sometimes on my way to work." "I'm David," he replied, closing his book carefully and placing it beside him. "You work at the coffee shop, don't you? I can smell the wonderful aroma on your clothes." They talked for 10 minutes before Sarah realized she was running late. But something about David's gentle manner and thoughtful conversation made her want to return. The next Tuesday, she brought him a cup of coffee and a warm blueberry muffin. "You don't need to do this," David said, though he accepted the gifts with genuine gratitude. "I want to," Sarah replied simply. This became their routine. Twice a week, Sarah would stop at the bench with coffee and something to eat. David always tried to refuse, but she insisted. They would talk about books, weather, small observations about the neighborhood. David never spoke about his past or his circumstances, and Sarah never pushed. She sensed there was more to his story, but respected his privacy. Winter arrived with unusual harshness that year. Snow fell heavily, and the temperature dropped well below freezing for days at a time. Sarah worried constantly about David. The bench was exposed to wind and weather, with only the small overhang from the hardware store offering minimal protection. On a particularly bitter Thursday morning, Sarah arrived at work to find her manager, Mrs. Peterson, looking troubled. "Sarah, dear, could I speak with you privately?" They went to the back office, where Mrs. Peterson poured herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. "I received a very strange phone call yesterday," she began slowly. "A man asking about you. He wanted to know about your character, your work ethic, your family situation." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather outside. "What kind of man? What did he want?" "He said he was conducting a background check. He seemed to know quite a lot about you already. About your college degree, your student loans, even about your volunteer work at the animal shelter last year." Fear crept up Sarah's spine. "Did he say why?" Mrs. Peterson shook her head. "I told him I wouldn't discuss my employees without their permission. But Sarah, it made me very uncomfortable. You haven't applied for any government jobs or anything that would require such a check, have you?" Sarah assured her she hadn't, but spent the rest of her shift feeling unsettled and worried. Who would be investigating her, and why? The next morning was Friday, which meant she would see David. Despite her anxiety about the mysterious phone call, she looked forward to their conversation. She prepared his usual coffee and selected a fresh apple cinnamon scone from the display case. But when she reached the bench, David wasn't there. She waited 15 minutes, growing more concerned with each passing moment. David was never late. In the 3 months she had known him, he had appeared at exactly 7:30 every Tuesday and Friday without fail. Sarah left the coffee and scone on the bench with a note, hoping he might appear later. All day, she found herself distracted and worried. Where could he be? Was he sick? Had something happened to him during the bitter cold night? Saturday morning, she walked past the bench on her day off. Still no David. The coffee cup she had left was gone, but there was no way to know if he had taken it or if someone else had. By Monday, Sarah was genuinely frightened. She asked at the hardware store, but the owner said he had never spoken to the man who sat on the bench. She checked with the other shop owners along the street, but no one knew anything about David or where he might have gone. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Sarah walked slowly toward the bench, not expecting to find anyone there. But as she rounded the corner, her heart leapt. David was back, sitting in his usual spot, reading his book as if nothing had happened. "David," she called out, hurrying toward him. "Where have you been? I was so worried." He looked up with that familiar gentle smile, but something in his expression had changed. There was a new openness, a resolution that hadn't been there before. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I owe you an explanation. And an apology." She sat beside him on the bench, her heart racing. "The background check your employer mentioned," David began slowly. "That was my doing. I had to know what kind of person you truly were." Sarah stared at him in confusion and growing alarm. David took a deep breath. "My name is David Morrison. I'm the founder and owner of Morrison Tech Industries." Sarah's mouth fell open. Morrison Tech was one of the largest technology companies in the state, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She had seen David Morrison's name in business magazines and newspapers countless times, though never his photograph. "I don't understand," she whispered. 5 years ago, my wife died of cancer. The grief nearly destroyed me. I lost interest in everything, including the company I had spent 30 years building. I gave control to my board of directors and disappeared from public life." David's voice grew softer, more vulnerable. "I began spending time in different neighborhoods, dressed simply, observing how people treated someone they assumed had nothing to offer them. In 5 years, you were the only person who showed consistent kindness to a stranger without expecting anything in return." Tears began to form in Sarah's eyes as the full weight of what he was saying settled over her. "I had my security team investigate you because I couldn't believe someone could be genuinely good without ulterior motives. But you are, Sarah. You are exactly who you appear to be." They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the morning traffic increase as people hurried to work. "I'm sorry I deceived you," David continued. "But I needed to know if there were still truly good people in this world. You showed me there are." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "So what happens now?" David smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, it reached all the way to his eyes. "Now, I'd like to take you to breakfast at a proper restaurant, if you'll let me. And then, if you're interested, I'd like to offer you a job heading up the new Community Outreach Division at Morrison Tech. We need someone who understands genuine compassion." Sarah looked at this man she had thought she knew, seeing him clearly for the first time. The kindness in his eyes was the same, the gentleness unchanged. The clothes and circumstances had been a disguise, but the person underneath was real. "I'd like that very much," she said quietly. As they walked down 5th Street together, Sarah realized that sometimes the most valuable things in life come disguised as something ordinary. She had thought she was helping a man who had nothing, but he had given her something precious in return, the knowledge that simple human kindness still mattered in a complicated world. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was rewarded in ways beyond imagination.